Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. Just going to do a quick overview of a hand plane that I have here. I'm showing you two. These are examples of what I believe is a Type 10 and a Type 11. But as you can tell by the title of the video, I'm going to focus more on the Type 11, and I'm actually going to call it something closer to an 11 3/4. And as the video goes on, I will tell you why I think that's actually the case. I purchased this plane and three others from an older gentleman out in the Wachusett area of Massachusetts, and I'll leave it up to you to check a map to figure out where that is. And he told me an interesting story that I'd like to convey to you because I think it's appropriate to this particular study. He said that this plane and the three others were purchased by his grandfather back around the time of World War I. And he was a gentleman older than myself, and I'm estimating he was probably born sometime in the 50s, which probably puts his father's birth date sometime in the 20s and his grandfather somewhere around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. So the story he told me was his grandfather finished a vocational degree of some sort around the time of World War I and set out purchasing his hardware. And here's a shot of what these four planes looked like when I first got them. And the one on the left is a 1930s Type 6. The second one from the left is that 4-square 1105 that I have a series of videos on, and I invite you to check them out. And the two on the right are these two planes that we're talking about. And this old gentleman described to me that neither he nor his dad used these hand planes very much, leading me to believe that I'm fortunate to have four hand planes that are in the exact condition from which they were purchased brand new. I've owned these planes for quite a while now, probably over a year, maybe even two, and the first thing I did was I lubricated all the pivoting joints so that when I went to disassemble them, I would be hedging my bets. And now I think all the nuts, bolts, and screws are loose enough for safe disassembly. So the typical disclaimer on the type study, it's more a set of guidelines as opposed to rules. And the John Walter book here has many type studies on many of the Stanley planes. And the number 4 hand planes is probably the most common one. And he's careful to point out that the type study is aimed at the number 4, and the further away you get from the number 4, the less accurate the type study is likely to be. The 3s, 4s, and 5s track each other pretty well, and the 7s and 8s aren't necessarily following all that close. So with that said, let's take a closer look here. Others have commented on a thing they call a theory of spare parts, sort of implying that Stanley planned on making sweeping changes to any type or any plane, but they had all these extra parts left over that they used up until they moved on to the next generation of that particular part. And I personally think that's a little misleading. I think Stanley implemented any and every change as soon as it made sense to make it. And this entire concept of something like a model year didn't really come in until the auto industry got rolling sometime in the late 20s, early 30s. I think the most unique identifier of a Type 11 is Stanley's famous V trademarks. And here's a close-up of this particular iron. A lot of people, this is their favorite, kind of in the shape of a V or a chevron. And there's the V trademark, cleaned up, easy to read. And I don't know if it's just me, but in my experience, every time I've run across one of these V trademarks, they seem to clean up really nicely. It's almost like Stanley during this period really stamped his trademark heavy duty into the irons. One thing curious about this Type 11 is that it has the tall knob, and here it is in contrast to the low knob on the Type 10. Most type studies that I've seen, including John Walter's guide, indicate that the tall knob was a Type 12 feature. However, he carefully words it that says all planes by now have a tall knob, kind of indicating that late in the Type 11s the tall knob made its debut. The condition of this plane looks to be pretty good. Like the other one, there seems to be a fair veneer of what looks like surface rust. I don't feel any deep pitting. It'll take some time cleaning it up to know for sure. On this particular one, the tote seems to be in very good condition. The knob seems to be in very good condition. And the Japanning at first glance looks to be very near complete. This plane has the smaller depth adjustment knob, and most people agree that this was consistent all the way through Type 11, and the larger depth adjustment knob shown here for comparison, showed up for type 12. So there they are side by side to give you an idea. This one's 1¼ inches and the smaller one is 1 inch in diameter. Consistent with the type 11, the lever on the lever cap is a little bit shorter than the type 12, and if I put them together, the type 12 is a little bit longer than the type 11. Removing the chip breaker and iron, there's a lot of sawdust in there. That sawdust jammed in here can facilitate pitting, just as an FYI. And there is no nut that holds the two together. It's a bit of a shame. You can see the steel looks pretty good. It looks like there's like an H stamped in the back of the iron. And the chip breaker looks in good shape. From what I understand, the chip breakers for a while were blued on the underside, and I think you can see that kind of nicely there. And the top has a fair amount of surface rust on it. And God only knows how old this sawdust is. Quite possibly be close to 100 years. And there's the iron, actually looking in pretty good shape for something this old. Just going to use an acid brush, clear away the sawdust. Not sure where this sawdust comes from. It's kind of curious. You know, planes produce shavings, not really sawdust. And there's a close-up of the frog. And the lateral adjust just has the word Stanley written in this orientation. Looks to be good and straight and a little stiff. So I don't know if it's showing up, but the pin to the lateral adjust is right there. You'll see that as the lateral adjust moves, the pin is rotating with it, which is proper. That's the way it's supposed to work. And the lever cap screw looks to be in near perfect shape. And we already touched on the knob bolt. Looks actually in pretty good shape for its age as well. And the knob doesn't appear to have any chunks taken out of it or cracks, so that's a nice surprise. Just going to clean out the slot for the screws with a dental pick. Looks like there's sawdust under the frog as well. And let's see, that came loose, as did that guy. And these two screws also look in really good shape. I don't see any chowdering of them. And the washers look a little cupped. That's fairly typical. And there's the frog. And isn't that something? How much sawdust is caked in here. Boy, look at that. And here's a look at all the sawdust that came out of that hand plane. And here's the frog seat. Japanning still seems to have a bit of a shine on it. Here's the frog adjustment screw, and boy, the edges are crisp and clean. Looks like it's just covered with a nice coating of surface rust, but that'll clean up really nicely. And the bolt for the tote actually has a little more surface rust on it than that from the knob. The nut looks to be in really good shape, save for a little tarnish. And the tote, looks like there might have been a little truncation back here. Boy, that's in good shape. That's going to clean up really nice. And somehow there was sawdust under the tote. So this frog seat with the wide rib for this frog are a type 10 to 15 if memory serves correct. So certainly type 11 should have that, and it does. If I turn it around, it can catch the light. PAT''D, patented. Looks like March 25th, 02, August 19th, 02, and April 19th, 10. And the third patent date debuted in type 11. I think the type 10s back before only had the top 2 patent dates. And after type 12, I think there was only the single patent date because these top 2, I believe, had expired. And here's the toe of the casting. It says Bailey here and then NO and a 4 over here. You can see where the knob was. The Japanning has a good shine to it. And it looks as though it's a little light up on the sides of the cheek. And this is a left-hand thread knob, so I'm actually doing righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. And that looks also to be in very good shape, save for a little bit of tarnish and dirt. The inside looks pretty bright brass in there. The yoke looks good. And looking at this Y adjuster yoke, it pivots and moves a little bit, but in terms of this direction there doesn't seem to be any play. Very nice. It's a very nice tight connection. That pin is basically the same size as the hole, plus maybe a few thousandths. And what that translates into is it'll help reduce the backlash between plunging the iron deeper or pulling the iron out back a little bit. And in here you can see there's a little bit of play between these round part engaging the front or the back of the depth adjusting nut. And I've had good luck with the screws so far. This one's being a little difficult. There you go. Excellent. And that screw looks to be in excellent shape. And this plate also looks fine, save for some rust. I have the shaft crushed between a couple pieces of pine, and you can loosen it that way. Luckily didn't need to use any heat. So based on everything I've looked at here, this seems to be a ladder Type 11 because of the tall knob. The years of the Type 11 are generally thought to be 1910 to 1918. The V trademark that I showed you is 1912 to 1918, so this is clearly not an early Type 11. I would venture probably a post 1915 or 16 would be my guess. But if anybody has any indication to narrow that a little bit more, please feel free, leave it in the comment. From what I understand, the Type 11s are fairly common, so I don't think this is a particularly valuable version of any particular Stanley hand plane. Well, I'm going to end this video here, and I appreciate you sticking around, and hopefully you enjoyed my share. I ended up cleaning up and lightly refinishing this guy to look like a well cared for but used plane, which is a look I like. Check out that video if you want to see the careful cleanup. By the way, it's a very nice hand plane, works beautifully. As always, take care, thanks for stopping by, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Keep your eyes out for the next one.